Valerie had a tough life. Her father heroically died in a conflict zone when she was very young, and her mother raised her alone, struggling to provide for her daughter, though she wasn't very successful. Valerie's mother, Victoria, was often sick and spent months on medical leave until her employer hinted that he didn't need an employee who was always ill. After resigning voluntarily, her mother would lock herself in a room and cry into a pillow out of helplessness. They always lacked money, sometimes having only bread for dinner, which Valerie dipped in simple olive oil or ate plain pasta. At school, she was dressed worse than everyone else, and the children were cruel. They would say what they saw. Valerie was considered an outsider, and her poverty and clothes were topics of discussion among all the girls. She got used to the taunts of her classmates whispering at the back of the class about how she came in a patched sweater again. When Valerie turned 14, her Aunt Kathy took her in to raise her instead of her mother. Kathy called Valerie a lazy freeloader, but showed no inclination towards work or housekeeping herself. Kathy quickly realized that Valerie, already quite grown up, could be put to work around the house. She imposed all the household duties on her niece and even sent her to the nearest store for wine, where Kathy's best friend, who worked there, could give it on credit. Kathy liked to enjoy a little red wine in the evening, and when there was no money for wine, she did not hesitate to run to a neighbor for a homemade drink. At the end of the month, they dipped bread in plain oil, the money quickly passing through Kathy's hands as they lived from one debt to the next. A drunken Kathy would repeatedly sing the same song about being a burden, often bringing Valerie to tears. The son of Kathy's friend who sold Valerie the wine for her aunt worked in the store. Kathy was bitterly envious of their family's prosperity and often talked to Valerie about whether she liked the son, but Valerie kept quiet. When Valerie became of age, Kathy began to plot a comfortable life for herself by marrying Valerie off to the store owner's son. Kathy imagined that if Valerie married well, she wouldn't have to worry about money and could shop without cash if they became family, as the store would start giving products for free and debts wouldn't need to be repaid. Kathy owed a significant sum to her friend, but Valerie, now grown up, was not eager to enter into Kathy's fabricated world of comfort. Suddenly assertive, she shouted that she wouldn't solve her aunt's financial issues, having had enough of her daily nagging and pressure to marry the friend's son. One day, Valerie couldn't take it anymore. She loudly slammed the door behind her, returning later to gather her simple belongings and a piggy bank, which Kathy didn't know about. She had been saving dollars since she had been at home, and the money was enough to pay for a room. Valerie also didn't forget to take her father's medals and award documents, the only memories of her deceased father. The medals became a talisman for Valerie. The money was enough not only to pay for modest rented accommodation, but also for food for the initial period after moving out from Kathy's place. After leaving, Valerie contemplated how to live on, considering education was out of the question since she needed to pay for the room and have something to live on while studying. At the supermarket, Valerie received a free newspaper with job vacancies in the city. All of them required qualifications she didn't have, so she randomly picked a phone number where a cleaning lady was needed AITA, the only job she could get after school. In the HR department, they hired her immediately due to the particularly toxic office environment. Cleaners didn't last long in that firm. The office was filthy for days before she signed the employment contract and immediately started her duties. Entering a room filled with computers and office workers, Valerie began diligently mopping the floor. "What is this smell? I don't understand." Valerie flinched from a sudden scream right in her ear, shouted by a beautiful but very mean girl. She had that toxic beauty typical of villainous heroines, AEUR. Black, sharp eyebrows, almond-shaped, angry eyes, hair the color of raven wings, high cheekbones, a sharp, pointed chin, and even a witch-like ancestor from the smoky hair in the center of her forehead was present. One look at her was enough to understand that this beauty was a real troublemaker. Nonetheless, the girl was more than just good-looking. "What are you looking at? Don't you feel that the mop reeks of rot?" the toxic beauty authoritatively ordered, passing by two guys sitting almost at the exit. Valerie heard them whispering, assessing her figure and other merits. Valerie was also a pretty girl, but unlike her antagonist, who had sent the newcomer to the hospital to rinse the rubber mop, her beauty was tender and soft. Valerie had kind facial features, big gray eyes, a high forehead, childishly plump lips, light, thick hair gathered in a casual ponytail with a simple elastic band. Even her old, out-of-fashion baggy clothes couldn't hide her slender waist and high chest. Shyly lowering her eyes with the mop in her hand, she reminded the guys of a poor Cinderella who had been scolded by one of the evil stepmother's daughters. These observations they shared in a quiet whisper so that they wouldn't be heard by the local office queen, Marissa AUR. It was she who scolded Valerie. They also shared impressions of the new cleaner. The girl was definitely nothing special. Only her clothes and shoes were poor. Only in vain did the guys think that Marissa couldn't hear their whispering AUR. The office queen had excellent hearing, possessed by all troublemakers who loved to stir things up. Valerie had barely left the room when Marissa was already enthusiastically discussing with her female colleagues every part of her poor old wardrobe. Valerie wanted to break the mop over her knee and send everyone packing, but memories of her own dire situation stopped her, not giving in to the emotions that surged within her. The girl rinsed the rubber mop and then returned to the office and continued mopping the floor, ignoring the taunts of the female part of the staff. Every day spent at work seemed like poison. Marissa managed to turn not only the employees, but also the management against the new cleaner. Only one guy sympathized with the girl AEUR, the same one who, at their first meeting, called her Cinderella. One day, he secretly waited for Valerie near the office because her workday ended later than the others. After waiting, Eric invited her to a cafe where they chatted happily. Eric seemed to Valerie open and kind, but the next day, in one of the long office corridors, one of Marissa's friends approached her. "You fool! Found someone to get involved with? Eric is Marissa's boyfriend. They're getting married. She'll destroy you. If I tell her you went to a cafe with him, Marissa will soon be the department manager. You'll have fun then," the girl said maliciously. The next day, Valerie was unpleasantly surprised when she entered the room where Marissa's department was located. A song immediately sounded. "Hello, thrift store girl," and Marissa herself, with a serious face, began asking her where she could buy the same vintage sweater as Valerie's, calling the broken shoes on the girl's feet a rarity and inventing new sophisticated mockeries for each item of the girl's wardrobe. The employees present at Valerie's humiliation politely giggled over Marissa's evil jokes. Not wanting to quarrel with the malicious careerist, Eric never again invited Valerie to a cafe. Accidentally bumping into her in the corridor, the young man shyly hid his eyes and looked away. He couldn't look into the eyes of the girl he had liked so much. He was ashamed and disgusted with himself for his betrayal, for he had giggled along with everyone at the spectacle staged by Marissa. He had long since stopped liking Marissa, but he didn't dare even hint that they should break up. Eric liked the job at the office, the salary suited him. He didn't want to take risks by quarreling with the future department head. Such people as Eric are usually called opportunists. The boy hoped for career advancement, to win a place under the sun by any means, even trampling on sincere feelings and even betraying his barely budding love. After the harassment of the cleaner, who dared to claim her fiancé, Marissa resembled a fairly high vampire. The office queen was satisfied with the public humiliation of Valerie so much that she even left the young cleaner alone for a while, having raised her self-esteem for a moment only to face the harsh truth of life. If she quit this job, she risked staying without a salary. Although she hadn't read the employment contract, when she later came to talk about resignation in the HR department, they told her that if she left before the agreed 40 days without working at least 1 month, she risked not receiving a penny, AUR. Supposedly, it was stipulated in the employment contract. Losing the earned money was too bad, so she had to stay. The money from the piggy bank was almost all gone. Besides, Valerie now took care of a small pet. She couldn't leave Max, a little white kitten, hungry. The kitten had somehow made its way into Valerie's office. She had to hide him from the evil Marissa until the end of the workday. Kind-hearted, she couldn't leave the helpless month-old kitten on the street. She took him home. The kind old lady in one of the rooms where Valerie lived was not against the kitten at all. Valerie named the kitten Max. When there was almost no money left, the girl shared the last yogurt with her pet. Payday finally arrived, the same day the corporate CEO was scheduled to visit the office. He was the head of the entire network and feared by everyone except Marissa, who had managed to win him over with her sharp mind and boldness. When the management made their rounds, the CEO always made sure to stop by his favorite's department. Seeing him, Marissa stood up and hurried to greet him, accidentally knocking over her coffee. She quickly kicked the cup under the table and greeted him with a bright smile. "Hello, Mr. Nicholas. Why haven't you visited us for so long? We've missed you," Marissa said, her lips pursed as if she wanted to kiss the CEO. Then, shooting a vengeful glance at Valerie, who was cleaning nearby, she continued, "Although it's hard to miss anyone here, HR keeps hiring just about anyone. The new janitor cleans so poorly, we might as well be sitting in a barn." Marissa gently took the CEO by the arm and led him to her workstation, pointing out the coffee stain she had created. "See, Donnie, you see how our janitor neglects to clean my workspace? It's dusty and dirty here now." Mr. Nicholas frowned. He was still a young man, imposing and authoritative, with a military background. Knowing the CEO disliked disorder, Marissa decided to sabotage the new janitor whom she considered a rival. "Come to my office," Mr. Nicholas said dryly as he walked away, his tone ominous. "Why is there disorder in the office? Why are you performing your duties so poorly?" Mr. Nicholas closely examined Valerie's flushed face. "It was clean. Where did this stain and dirt come from?" "I don't know," Valerie managed to say. "Marissa just doesn't like me. She constantly picks on me. She probably spilled the coffee on purpose because she wants you to fire me." Valerie, suddenly emboldened in front of the CEO, spoke up. Mr. Nicholas thoughtfully tapped on the desk with his pen. "You seem like a good person. Why do the office workers dislike you so much? Who are you? Introduce yourself." Valerie gave her name and surname. Hearing her rather unique surname, the CEO grew agitated. "And your father, EURTM's name. What was his name?" Valerie lowered her head but proudly raised it again. "His name was George. He died," but the CEO interrupted her and continued. "In a military conflict, he was my friend. He died saving my life." Then he fell silent for a long time. Valerie stood opposite him, shifting from foot to foot as the silence stretched. "So that's it," Mr. Nicholas finally said. "Marissa has indeed organized a hazing. We'll sort this out. Go back to work for now. Tomorrow I'll hire another janitor. AITA, your TM's not right for a hero URTM's daughter to be pushing a mop across the floor. You at your Tamel go to college. Is your mother alive?" Valerie shook her head no, then nodded affirmatively. "I'm an orphan. So, you have a place to live?" Valerie shrugged. "I was living with my aunt. Now I'm renting a room." Mr. Nicholas clenched his fist tightly on the table. "We'll sort this out." That day, Valerie rushed to her rental apartment, her legs barely touching the ground from excitement. What a day AUR, her first paycheck, and even a generous bonus. She ran into a pet store buying cat pack TAC for Max, and spotting a toy for kittens, she couldn't resist buying it. That day, she was very proud of herself. Indeed, she was self-sufficient, able to support herself and her cat. And most importantly, the CEO had settled accounts with the nasty Marissa, who had made Valerie your TMM's life miserable. Now no one would demean and mock her old, unattractive clothes, although she could now afford to buy something new. After feeding Max, the girl rushed out to buy new clothes, but the next day was even more wonderful. Arriving at the office, Valerie was surprised to see the floors being cleaned by an unfamiliar elderly woman. HR, unusually affable, approached her with a new contract. She was hired as a customer service operator. Later that day, the CEO came again. He invited Valerie to his office, where he handed her apartment keys. "I once bought this apartment for my future children, but I have none yet. Live there. It's not right for the daughter of my friend to wander around rental rooms." "Oh, I have a kitten. Can I bring him?" Valerie asked. Mr. Nicholas laughed heartily. "Yes, even with an alligator, move in. The apartment has been empty for a long time. Your TM, I'll keep house together with your kitty." After packing her things and Max, Valerie warmly said goodbye to the old lady from whom she had rented the room and moved into the spacious apartment. After moving, Valerie did not just walk to work, she flew. Although listed as a simple operator, she barely made calls. The CEO treated her like his own child, buying her new clothes, household appliances for her new home, and began to introduce her to the business affairs of the company. The childless leader saw Valerie as his successor. He wished that if something happened to him, Valerie could replace him in all areas related to the work of the network. Surprised by the transformations in Valeria URTM's appearance and behavior, and by the attitude towards her from the management, Eric immediately found the courage to end things with Marissa. He did not upset Marissa with this. She had long considered him a dead end. Trying to court the boss of URTM's daughter at his new workplace after gaining freedom from the former office queen, the opportunist tried to mend relations with Valerie, but she already knew his worth, so she coldly and briefly refused his offer to hang out over the weekend. Valerie remembered in surprise. How could I have liked someone like that before? And I even suffered from unrequited love, even cried, scolded myself for my past short-sightedness. One day, while buying food for Max in a pet store, Valerie knocked a can of Pâté off the shelf, which was deftly caught by a strong hand before it hit the floor. "Donna Urim skimp on good food for cats," the tall, unfamiliar young man said, approvingly nodding at the packet of cat food in Valerie Urim's hands. I love him," Valerie responded, a bit flustered. "And I love my kitty, too. Urim's a Savannah." "What breed is your cat?" the young man inquired. "And mine is a pedigreed breed, a noble Russian," Valerie joked. "He snuck into our office, and I picked him up so that no one would throw him out." Thus, Max came to live with her, and she named him after a great historical figure. Suddenly, Valerie opened up, and within 10 minutes of meeting, the young man and the girl chatted as if they were old acquaintances. The young man understood Valeria URTM's jokes, and she liked his openness and views on life, which he gladly shared with her. Unnoticed by Valerie, he walked her home, and they stood near the entrance for a long time, talking about everything under the sun. They didn't URTMT want to part, but it was already too dark outside. Valerie thought that it was indecent to show such obvious mutual sympathy on the first day of acquaintance, but he preempted her, saying that he didn't want to leave, but decency demanded it. It was as if he had read her thoughts as she climbed the steps. Valerie thought in astonishment that it was all true about the impulses, about the union of souls, about finding your person. She spent the whole night awake, replaying in her head the plots of dramas she had read, where the heroes met their other halves. The next morning, completely sleep-deprived, Valerie got ready for work, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't want to go. She wanted to run to the pet store to try to find the young man. What a surprise it was when leaving the building she saw him. "You know I couldn't leave you. I just ran home to feed the cat and came back to your house. I watched your window all night." The young man pointed to the windows on the second floor where Valerie lived. "And you didn't sleep either. I saw that the light was on in your bedroom all night. It's URTM's fate, understand? It was meant to be. URTM are mine and URTM yours, period," said the young man, pulling her towards him and inhaling the scent of her hair eagerly.